very good evening to you from India. We are at the last session of the first day of the Global Virtual Conference on Reimagining and Transforming the University. My name is Rajkumar. I'm the founding Vice Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University. I have great pleasure in welcoming all of you to the 9th session of the first day of the conference on the theme Digital Transformation of Higher Education and the Future of Online Teaching and Learning. We have a very distinguished set of institutional heads and leaders who are making transformative contributions to this particular aspect of higher education. Let me quickly introduce my panelists here. Professor Dr. REKHA DATTA, Interim Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, MONMOUTH University, United States of America. Professor Dr. MARVIN KRISLOV, President, Pace University, United States of America. Dr. STEFANIE LINDQUIST, Senior Vice President, Global Academic Initiatives, Arizona State University, United States of America. Professor Dr. INDU SHAHANI, Founding Dean, Indian School of Management and Entrepreneurship, India. Professor Dr. Lawrence SHERMAN, Director, Cambridge Police Executive Education Program and Director of Research, Jerry Lee Center for Experiential Criminology, University of Cambridge, United Kingdom. Professor Jeremy Way, my colleague, Director of the Office of Digital Learning and Online Education at OP Jindal Global University, India. Professor Brent White, Vice Provost, Global Affairs and Dean, Global Campus, the University of Arizona, United States of America. I also have great pleasure in inviting and welcoming Professor KATHLEEN MODROWSKI, Dean, Jindal School of Liberal Arts and Humanities, OP Jindal Global University, India, who will be serving as moderator in this session. Over to you, KATHLEEN. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Vice Chancellor. Welcome everyone. I'm really pleased that we have such a varied and illustrious group of panelists who have such a wealth of experience and information. I'll just introduce our topic a bit because I think no one can avoid the subject now. That's all we see everywhere. And that is that the COVID-19 pandemic has really changed the way that we look at the world and the way we look at education now. We're all familiar with this being a reality. Is this going to be a sustained reality? Is it the new normal? And those are questions that are really germane to our planning as educators, the vice chancellors, and to our students as well. What's going to happen? So according to the way that this has affected education, higher education has seen, this is a UNICEF statistic, 128 million plus students in higher education who are no longer sitting in the classroom. I think that's down to everyone. And of course, everyone knows the statistics, the 1.7 billion young people who are affected by this. So are we going to be moved to a university system? That's what we're focusing on. That will be one without bricks and mortar structures. Are we going to have to learn a whole new dimension of learning and the way we think about learning? Now, many of us and many universities think of this as something very new. However, let's keep in mind that MIT's been looking at this subject since 1985 with their media lab. And there are institutions, certainly in India and all over the world, including Singularity University, Khan Academy, the use of MOOCs in the classrooms, which one way or another have been exploring the way in which we think and learn. Some of the topics that are being explored now with a lot more attention that I think we at the university do not have the time and the luxury to work with it. What does the body mean? What is the significance of the body in place? How do people learn differently? Who benefits from online learning? Who is someone who is going to have difficulty with this learning? And all important is, do we prepare the professors and the classrooms to deal with the new type of learning that we're going into. Some of our universities have been prepared. Some are scrambling to get prepared. I, who have spent the semester in India, am really just amazed at how much people have done, how quickly they've done. And now we're standing back a bit and everyone is looking at how good have we done what we say we're doing. Are we going to have to change new paradigms of learning so that we're able to look at the way we teach and the way students learn? The other question that emerges, of course, is this the demise of the bricks and mortar system? I think we've all read that Amazon, Google, Facebook have extended their work from home policy through January 2021. Many undergraduates, over 5 million, will continue with learning and studying from home. So we have to see how many schools are taking this seriously. How many are looking at the as one that will not be this bricks and mortar system that we have created? How prepared are we? These are the major problems we're looking at, along with, are we going to look into a crystal ball and say, this is something that is going to be the new normal, or is this a Band-Aid we've put on learning right now that's going to have to be changed again when we go back to the system of regular classrooms and the investment that many institutions, that many governments have put into creating classroom space. So these are some of the major areas we're going to be looking at, along with the innovations that have taken place that are being borrowed, along with opportunities for collaboration. Because for those of you who have continued with the conference, in previous sessions, many people have discussed the question of collaboration, how valuable it has for students, for instructors to be able to get to see each other, but are we going to have to reinvent ways which the student body and which the professors and the communities at large collaborate with us? So let us begin. We have some questions, and I would like to have you respond to them. Then we're going to open up our program to questions from the audience. But the first question I have, I'm going to ask Professor Datta. Professor Datta, at your university and within your experience, how has the IT infrastructure changed at the university? How have faculty been prepared for this change? And is it going to be possible to bridge the gap between involvement of the technology of learning and the way the courses are delivered? So I turn it over to you, Professor Datta.
Thank you, Professor MODROWSKI, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really delighted to be part of this eminent panel, and more so, I'm delighted to be, again, involved with Jindal Global University. I was, speaking of collaboration, I was a visitor at the university as a Fulbright scholar 2 years ago, and it's very nice to see since then the university has been recognized as an institution of eminence and really is continuing such great work. So thank you. And I personally am indebted to this university, and it's a privilege and honor for me to be part of this session and having this important discussion at this time. So as you quite rightly pointed out, Professor MODROWSKI, this past spring, we were all over the world, actually, we were forced to transition into remote instruction, regardless of whatever primary mode of instruction we were engaged in. I am a provost at at Monmouth University, which is a medium-sized university, about close to 6,000 students, but our specialty is personalized learning with a liberal arts focus. So we have what has been in higher ed, known for quite some time, been holding the bastion of personalized in-person learning, and we have championed the fact that regardless of how much technology you introduce and how much professional education you introduce, the value of personalized learning or in-person interaction is going to be there. So as you can tell, with this philosophy and mission, obviously did give a jolt, and we had to go to emergency remote instruction. Prior to this, just like with higher ed in general, we have had discussion part in terms of address the issue of enrollment, partly the address the issue of access. Many universities have either transitioned into or have been looking into ways of using different modalities, even outsourcing some of this task to outside companies. And the professoriate has always had a kind of a struggle with that in terms of what is this going to do for the pedagogy. So that pedagogical issue is still very much alive, even as we have transitioned. And in the spring, almost in a matter of a couple of weeks, we had to transform about 1,500 courses from an in-person instruction modality to a fully online mode. So that did come with challenges. Fortunately, our university also had and has a robust information management unit, and the instructional side of it really rose up to the task, and we offered training to faculty, and pretty much both our full-time and part-time faculty were on board, and we had no choice. So given that we are in this health crisis, we did not have any choice of even being in person at any point during that time. At the time, we thought it would be just a matter of maybe weeks and possibly months, but we will have the summer months to kind of get back to our quote unquote normal course delivery options. The past 4 or 5 months, all I have engaged in is in task forces, trying to envision the different ways in which, in terms of how we call it, the fall scenario planning. In fact, as of this morning, I've had 3 meetings just discussing what is the best way and what for our university. So we're still struggling with how to meet the expectations of students in terms of in-person learning. Also, kind of we have to address the health challenges. We're still not out of the woods and cannot go back to fully in classroom instruction. However, we are also trying to look at this challenge as an opportunity for innovation. And so again, during the summer, offered online instruction academies for the faculty. I think some of the lessons we're learning are very, very telling and sobering in terms of how we can improve online instruction. And I'll just mention 2 things that we're focusing on, and then hopefully we'll have some more time. I know our time is limited, so hopefully we can come back to some of the discussion. So the first one is the quality. So in terms of having online education, there is an assumption out there that online education can never be the same as in-person instruction. So we want to really break through that myth and offer students a quality education, regardless of whether it is offered through online, hybrid, or fully in-person instruction. Now, I understand there are limitations when we can discuss that, but ensuring quality was one of the first things that our faculty dealt with, and we spent weeks trying to come up with models and units and ways in which we can address that. The other is communicating with the students and meeting the students' expectations. So one of the biggest lessons we learned in the springtime being that we went into this without much preparation, is that students also were not ready to handle, in our case, 5 or 6 courses fully online. So setting those expectations for students was a big task that faculty need to not just entertain, but accommodate. And that is something as we are preparing for the fall, which is also filled with uncertainties, we're trying to manage expectations better than we did in the springtime. So I will pause there, and I know we have other distinguished colleagues, and one of the things that I wanted to make sure is really, I hope all of you are doing well and your universities are doing well. This is a time when we have also come together in ways that I have never seen before. This meeting is a good example of that. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Professor Modrowski. I'm looking forward to hearing from my colleagues here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Datta. And we will have a chance, I hope, to go into some of those major points that you brought up, along with one that you didn't bring up, and that's the health of students. You did mention that, and I think that's something that many of us think about, but we don't deal with it very directly. So continuing with this idea of transition, I'd like to ask Professor KRISLOV what he thinks, as having been associated with liberal arts programs with universities that followed a very strong tradition, now at Pace, previously at Oberlin, I believe. I think I'd like to ask you the question, do you think that bricks and mortar university place is so tied in with the reputation and the lives of the students? Do you think that can be replaced by remote learning and by the online courses and universities that are going to be held completely out of a physical site?
Well, thank you for that. And it's great to see everybody. Kudos to those of you who are nearing midnight in India. I really appreciate your focus. I think that we've all changed, and that remote learning, one thing that we had done at Pace, but not to the extent of this last spring. I think remote learning is going to be more and more a part of the landscape, particularly for graduate education. But I also think there's innovation in terms of flipped classrooms and other forms of supplemental learning for undergraduate education. I think, though, that when you think about the traditional age population, the 18 to 22-year-olds, it's very unlikely that we're going to move away from in-person learning for the majority of instruction. And why do I say that? First of all, 18 through 22-year-olds in this country see university as a place for socialization. We see it as a place for skills development. We're the #1 rated university for upward mobility. So over 50% of our students, or roughly 50% of our students, are first generation. So what we do is we work with them in person. And there's a lot of evidence that for students who have not necessarily had all the advantages at home, it's really important to have those in-person services. Now, we've been providing those, but the students tell us over and over, and the evidence tells us over and over, that that's not really the same. And of course, we also, like Professor Datta, focus on experiential education. But I'd say that if you think about the future, what we're hearing from students, the traditional age undergraduate students in particular, they want to come back, they want to be with other students, they have social activities, they have athletic activities, they have clubs and so forth. Some of them are also not in homes that allow them to study effectively, either space, because of technology, or other reasons. So I think that the residential component or the in-person component is here to stay. But I do think that we all are finding ways to have a variety of fora in which to to have education.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that response. And I hope we can, when we have time at the end, to talk a little bit more explicitly how we're going to be replacing some of these experiences, because I think it looks like for many of us, the next semester is going to be carried on remotely. So thank you for that response, Professor KRISLOV. And I'd like to move now to Professor LINDQUIST. Professor LINDQUIST from Arizona. Your university has started many programs that will be programs where students will be working with one or more university, and there is an influence on having dual degree programs. Beyond dual degree, I'd like to know if you think that there will be much larger consortiums in which students will be able to pick and choose for the courses they want to take from different places, not only in their home country, not only in the university where they're registered, but at several different places, and that these courses will be accepted and the degrees will validate it. Do you have any idea on this?
Thank you so much, Kathleen, and it's great to see everyone, and greetings from Phoenix. As you can see, I've got palm trees behind me, so that's an advertisement for Phoenix if you ever want to come visit. So it's a great question, and I have thought a little bit about the question in response to the prompt that you sent earlier. And I was thinking about, it brought to mind Buckminster Fuller, because Buckminster Fuller in about 1982 started or initiated thinking about how often human knowledge doubles. And at the turn of the 21st century, it was estimated using his methodology that, knowledge doubles every 1 to 2 years. But since then, in the last 20 years, we've seen estimates that knowledge is doubling every 12 hours. Now, of course, this is in large part due to technological advancements, but a burgeoning population and growing number of people who are engaging with the internet and thinking independently about issues have generated considerable knowledge. And so for that reason, I think that first, no faculty member can maintain the kind of level of knowledge necessary to ensure that they know all the aspects of their discipline and can ensure students have all that knowledge. Is just simply impossible. And so we have to think and shift our thinking about what faculty are there to do in terms of helping students. They're no longer presenters of information, or they shouldn't be, I don't think, but rather they're leaders, they're guides, they're facilitators to help students develop their own independent capacity, assimilate knowledge, and to be discerning about what knowledge is valid, what data is valid and reliable, et cetera. So I think that we're seeing and should be seeing, given this incredible burgeoning of knowledge around the world, we should be seeing a shift in how faculty members think about their curriculum and think about how they're engaging students. There's this new concept I've seen of late called micro-learning, that we are, as we approach particular problems, we engage with information in a micro-learning fashion so that we can address that particular problem. And this is, again, is an acknowledgement that we simply cannot understand the full landscape of knowledge in any particular discipline at any particular time. It's simply growing too fast. And as a result of that, I think universities have come to be aware that their particular faculty, even at a place like ASU, where we have about 4,500 faculty members, even in such a large institution, such a comprehensive institution, we simply will not have access to the information, the research, the knowledge that could be gained through collaboration with other universities around the world. And so we are very keen on partnering, as I know all the members of this panel are, on partnering with other universities in ways that can that create a force multiplier effect for the educational opportunities we can provide. An example of that at ASU is with something we've developed called the Plus Alliance. And the Plus Alliance includes King's College, Arizona State, and University of New South Wales. And part of the purpose of that alliance was to think about ways in which we can collaborate to create degrees together so that we can take advantage of the expertise in the three universities. But of course, this could be true of any university to university or multi-university collaboration. And I do think that's the future. I always call ASU the permeable university. It's a porous university. And the idea there is that we are very much engaging with our community and with other universities to develop knowledge and learning opportunities for our students. The other part of the question, and I'll just say one more thing. The other part of the question had to do with how we can personalize curriculum. So getting back to this issue of flexibility, I think it is very, very important in light of the way that knowledge is changing and growing at such a rapid pace, that we enable students to be flexible in their career path that they choose, and especially in the context of the kinds of problems and challenges that humankind is facing around the world. So we know those problems are interdisciplinary in nature. Clearly, climate change is an interdisciplinary problem. Issues associated with social justice are interdisciplinary challenges. Income inequality, interdisciplinary issues that require minds of all different disciplines to address and see if we can make forward progress in that to address those challenges. Students also are very aware that they themselves need to be interdisciplinary in their approach. And so I think it's very important for us to ensure that universities around the world, wherever they are situated, have the kind of flexibility necessary to pivot to and engage in curricular change or enabling curricular opportunities for students and options for students, because the world simply demands it at this point in time and students are demanding it. And this is also true across the delivery modalities that we choose. I think going forward, this is not a black swan moment. I think it's a carpe diem moment. I think what we're seeing here is an opportunity for universities to rethink about how they deliver education along a continuum, where you have the traditional Oxford type education at one end in a small classroom seminar context, and at the other end, asynchronous online education, and then everything in between. And this can really serve students. We often hear from our online students, and we have about 50,000 and now growing, of course, online students at ASU, that they're grateful for the online opportunity because it's better for them given the way that they learn. They need the flexibility. They're raising children. They're in the middle of work. They prefer a more quiet, systematic approach to how they learn at their own speed. This is very, very beneficial. Certain people learn, as we know, differently. People have different, they're visual learners, they're oral learners, and online education offers another ability to help us learn in a way that may be most beneficial to them. So again, I just want to close and then look forward to the conversation that I agree this is a moment of considerable change. COVID is an accelerant of change, and that change is here to stay. I think that the world is waking up to hope regulatory bodies are to the opportunities that are offered by the alternative modalities, again, along a continuum with hybrid, asynchronous, synchronous, in-classroom learning that we can now deploy effectively as we learn how to do it better in the future to really reach our students where they are. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the information, and thank you for, I'm sure, the work that you're doing with faculty as facilitators and how this is into play with the new mode of learning, rather than the faculty being the sole source along with books of information for the students. So fostering that independence. Going in along the same line with different modes of programs being created, different types of learning that can be combined. I'm going to ask Jeremy to talk about what university can do. Jeremy, wait, I can't see, but I know you're there. What if universities create dual mode classes? And these dual mode classes will allow the learner, the student, to join the class in person or do it online. So this will also reduce the cost of education. This will allow, as Professor has just mentioned, the LINDQUIST has mentioned, the need for flexibility for people who are either at home, have jobs, are continuing their education, or need to learn new skills. But do you see a future? Are there models that you know of in which you have both synchronous learning and asynchronous learning for those who are enrolled in the classroom?
Thank you.
Jeremy?
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen. And hi, everyone. I think this is certainly an important moment for universities. A challenging time, of course, but I think an opportunity to evolve as well. I think this fall and possibly the years ahead will provide a lot of experimentation, I think, with these, with different models, online, offline, and I think this forced experimentation, I'm hopeful that there will be great models. I think there already are great models out there, and I think this will create a time for great advances here. And I think, it presents a challenge though to have both offline and online in the same course design, of course, because you have students from different backgrounds, experiences, locations trying to come together. I think the strengths that faculty have of reading a room and bringing the students together around learning objectives, it's of course much more challenging and complex with these kind of models. Yet, I think, with thoughtful preparation and design, that you can create some fascinating kind of new modes that can broaden the classroom, can bring in more perspectives, and can allow people to learn at different paces and different speeds. I think, as I see it, the key here is there's, for those that are trying to innovate in this, these new modes, it's looking at the student. And before I took the role as in the Office of Online Learning and Digital Education, my focus area was entrepreneurship. And, speaking with student entrepreneurs on campus, the big question, first question I would always, ask them about is their customers and how are they solving problems with their customers. And I think this is what universities need to really focus on is the students and the problems and their experiences, and be laser focused on providing a good experience. I think students are doing this. They have been demanding this for some time. And I think, like I said, this will be a moment for universities to rise to that challenge. And I think this is, certainly, it's been a challenge, I think, for universities, and a dilemma of how to respond to digital transformation. I think, there's a lot of wisdom in the institutions and the faculty, yet there's a lot of change in the market and what students' needs are. So, I think universities and faculty should continue to be, open to partnering with, technology companies in a collaborative way. I know that there's challenges in that, but I think it's important for faculty and for universities to, take some of these insights about how to deliver to students' expectations, in a way that universities may not be optimized to do, while still maintaining universities do great and not losing sight of the mission and the vision of the university. But I'm very hopeful. I think I think online education can really create a where we can educate so many more people than we do now. I think universities just don't reach enough people. I think this is a great opportunity to really meaningfully expand that base. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those thoughts, and thank you for, I know a lot of this is coming from your own experience in entrepreneurship and the possibilities of reaching students and putting their education into practice. And about reaching students, reaching out to them, I'm going to move to Professor SHAHANI. I fielded for you the question that was about different technologies that are being put into university systems for students. The example was given that students' questions were being answered. They gave, the question gives certain universities that are using chatbots and bots to have the questions answered. Also that they were pretty accurate. I know a lot has been done in this area about machine learning. And also now, even at Jindal, this term to facilitate student enrollment and taking exams, we administered online learning that was enabled by artificial intelligence for students to take the entrance exam. So can you let us tell us if you think that there will be changes in the way university administration, based on your present experience, your experience in the UGC, do you think university administrations and the internal bureaucracies are going to change to meet the challenges, meet the innovations that we're seeing?
Thank you so much. And if I have to give a very quick answer, I would say yes. And I do hope the universities will change and will bring in this. For years and years, with 3 decades in a public university system, and now almost under a decade in a private university system, I kept saying to myself, 19th century curriculum taught by 20th century faculty to 21st century students. We need to disrupt. We need to bring in innovation. And I must, just to give you a background, I think this is an exciting time for all of here in India, especially because yes, transition will have to take place. It's time that Indian education system is reimagined, reinvented. And I remember very distinctly, Stephanie, I don't know if you were around at that time, but I visited ASU sometime in the early 1990s. And I was so impressed by the online education then. And when I came back and I gave a, shared, I was principal of a leading institution in the University of Mumbai. And I came and shared that with my faculty. I was foo-fooed and said, what's that? And how's that going to happen? And then gradually, I think online learning was supportive of formal learning. But today, online learning is formal learning. And so I think it's a perfect form, as I call it, especially when it's a culmination of pedagogy, technology, and learner needs. And I don't think we in India should sleep, and that's why I think Rajkumar sleep, and he doesn't let us also sleep. He keeps me to have me here at midnight speaking to you. I'm the only Indian, right, from the Indian, here at midnight hour.
No,
but I think that's what
Jeremy is there too. Yeah.
Okay, right. But you can see how much younger he is. Come on now, give it to him.
No,
he must be sleeping late anyway. All right. So just to say, it is the perfect storm, and I think we have to bring in the change now. I'm happy to say that Dr. Rajkumar has very, very much, made this the entire conference encouraging the government, encouraging all the regulatory bodies to bring in transformation, and the education policy we hope will transform a lot. To talk about technology now, if somebody asks me, would you like an amazing teacher or would you like an amazing technician? One's going to say, give me an amazing teacher, right? But what happens when an amazing teacher gets some amazing technology? That's what's happening now. And I preside over 5 new institutions, very new age institutions with design thinking education, with entrepreneurship, with, visuals and management and so on. And all these 4 or 5 institutions, we are now seeing the change. I think where the change came in was there was no top approach. On 3rd March, WHO announced pandemic. On 18th March, faculty went into a war zone. We have about 200 faculty, about over 2,000 students, and just formed. And my faculty turned out to be outliers using technology. Yes, I think technology will make a difference. It's not just that artificial intelligence and machine intelligence will have their limits and potentials in education, but they will not be able to take over the role of a teacher, but they will be enablers. And I bring this in, and I hope the governments understand this, which they will have to. I have to say that our Prime Minister inaugurated India's first humanoid, Mitra, and it was from Bangalore. And we were the first institution to bring in Mitra, and this was 4 years back. And we brought in Mitra to do campus tours. And does campus tours till today. And the students love it. And the teachers are happy because they don't have to, the counselors don't have to run around doing this. And so, yes, technology has to be brought in. Chat box, video consultations, live web chats, as online platforms, they will help. I don't know how many of you have heard, but EdTech companies are actually the ones who are now getting maximum knowledge in, which is one of these, is really one of the highest companies here in India. And so I think, I don't know how many of you know, but at the time of Y2K, it was the Indian software engineers who took over the world. And I feel at this time, I have a lot of faith in my faculty because the role has changed. And I'm sure all of you know that how the role has changed. It no longer is the role of a teacher just teaching or creating knowledge. It's of enabling, coach, and also facilitate knowledge. Students will want to learn the way they want to. They will decide how and what they learn, and they will be pushed by their curiosity and hunger to excel. And I'm seeing a lot of this happening in my online sessions. I had a coffee with the dean today with my students, and they were pushing me. I mean, I was asking me, are you the dean or am I the dean? That's the kind of enthusiasm that young digital natives have. And online, I have to say, online education has actually revived this amazing enthusiasm between teachers and the students. So yes, we do hope that very soon the government of and the HRD ministry on the others, by the end of the last session, that probably Dr. Rajkumar will have is a chat box. Few chat boxes together on it. Let's hope for the best.
Fingers crossed on all. Thank you very much. Thank you for that, your insightful statement. And I'd like to move on to Professor Brent White. Now the question comes up, about assessment. And this is, you know, how are students going to show their learning? Right now, there's a lot of emphasis still on final exams. Certain schools in the United States rely more on, you know, continuous assessment, some in India as well. But there's the notion of final exam, and in certain domains, such as law, et cetera, there's also this emphasis on the letter grade, the movement of, you know, going from giving the right answers. Will we be able to see something beyond the letter grade? And will we be able, through these changes in learning, in remote learning and in the use of technology, to see something that is more sensitive to the way the student is really learning? Also, will there be questions? This has risen quite a bit this semester, of the legality of the way that students are being graded, the way the grades are being given out. So I'm going to ask Professor White to respond to this.
You know, you would think the Zoom would have gotten used to unmute. So I was saying thank you for the question, and thank you for the take part of this day. To still, and look forward to back to Global University at the soonest possible moment. I was there very early in the formation of Jindal Global University, and have witnessed the transformation from afar, and look forward to getting back on campus. One kind of good lesson, if you're asked a question that you don't know the answer to, is to change the question. And so I appreciated your invitation earlier to answer a different question if we wanted. So I'll say on the question of grading, obviously there have been great advances in AI as technology for grading. I think that in areas like math, science areas that universities, including the University of Arizona, have begun to use automated grading. I know the GRE has done so as well. But there's some criticism on the other side that the grading doesn't work, particularly in discerning creativity, that the grading of written essays still leaves much to be desired. And with that, I want to use that as a departure to an issue that I thought a little bit more about, and that is that certainly we need to solve these questions of how we deliver education globally, including how we grade, given the imperative that we deliver education online. To give some context for this, or my comment, the global population of college age students, and that's the population 18 to 23, is expected to reach 80 million people by 2024. International education enrollments that will grow by 200% in that same time period, from about 250 million now to almost million students by 2024. It's simply unrealistic to think we can build border universities to satisfy this global demand. There's not enough money to do that. There's not enough time. I think I've read in one study we could build 20 universities a day in Sub-Saharan Africa and not build enough to meet the future demand or even keep up with current demand for global education. Aside from the issues of funding that goes into building, creating brick and mortar campuses, there are global issues with having enough universities to deliver programs of high quality or with efficient institute capacity. So in our current kind of brick and mortar model, certainly very little chance providing the opportunity to individuals that a high quality individual, high quality international education can provide. A focus in global education and kind of the defining characteristic of international education has been the notion of mobility, and that you could provide education to students by moving them. What I think the post or the COVID has brought home to us is that we live in a post-mobility world. And this is a concept that we've been exploring at the University of Arizona for already quite some time, understanding that the part of the world's population that is mobile, that could ever have the opportunity to go abroad for an international education is tiny compared to the number of individuals who could benefit from global education. And there are a number of barriers that make mobility unlikely and indeed just be unrealistic. The first cost is simply not possible for most people in the world to go abroad to study, to afford the living expenses, even if they have a scholarship, and with the cost of education, even at relatively inexpensive state universities like the University of Arizona, it's still $36,000 in tuition for an international student plus living expenses, which puts it way too high. Then there are barriers of language, political barriers to mobility, and coronavirus has taught us that we live not only in a post-mobility world, but a kind of, in a figurative sense, but a post-mobility world in the very literal sense. But online offers great promise, both at the local level and in terms of broadening access to international education. It's a rational, cost-effective means to widen educational opportunities. And compared to building ever more and mortar institutions, digital learning promises a cheaper and more instantaneous remedy to the needs of providing broader access to education. A challenge, and the one I'd like to focus for the remainder of my remarks, for using online education as a way to deliver both locally and globally, is that we're still constrained by technological infrastructure barriers, commonly called the digital divide, in which many people simply lack real access to the type of broadband, wireless, that would allow them to access online education in a meaningful way. We've seen this firsthand in the state of Arizona as we've gone online in response to COVID-19. Our students left campus in the fall, the spring and March, and we discovered that here in the state of Arizona, we don't have sufficient broadband. Ended up setting 12 different stations where people could go sit in their cars and get access to high-speed internet. We'd had about 10,000 unique visitors or users of those sites on a weekly basis while we were in session. An article in the New York Times, kind of a couple months to our kind of new COVID world, about individuals who go in their car and sit outside a Starbucks or another coffee shop so they can work in their cars as their mobile office. And what that says is that here, even in Arizona and the United States, there's still insufficient access, and there's a gap between those who have and those who cannot afford access or live in regions where they don't have access. So if we're going to make real the promise of online education as a way to deliver education, whether purely locally in a local market or globally, we have to make sure that students have access to a place to go where they can get access. And so one of the concepts we've been exploring and implementing at the University of Arizona is the idea that the idea of a campus changes. And a campus becomes a place where people go to have access to the resources they need to get an online education. So that's, of course, access to internet, access to a quiet place to study, access to an environment that is conducive to learning, and indeed access to a community and ability to have the flexibility of an online education to deliver education cost effectively to many people at the same time, but to preserve that in-person engagement. So we have kind of, in response to COVID-19, accelerated microcampus. It was about 15 locations in early March, and we've expanded that to 150 locations around the globe where students can go and have a campus experience, either at an actual campus where they can go to a co-working space and study there, or perhaps live in a student accommodation that's purpose-built for students and also have access to an online education there. I'm very proud that we're partnering with Jindal Global University as one of our global microcampus locations where students can study at the University of Arizona. And at the same time, Jindal provides those students an enriching in-person experience on their campus where they can attend classes in person, could live on campus and engage in the kind of extracurricular activities that I think an on-campus experience brings to students. And so we've also, though, partnered with 91 Springboard, which is a large co-working company in India, and about 26 stations in multiple cities, so that students in India can go there, have access to the internet, have access to a quiet place to study, and access to the 91 Springboard community, which is appropriate. A campus co-working space might depend on what's closest, what can the student get to, or it might depend on where their stage in life is. So someone as a graduate student might prefer a co-working space where they can also network and perhaps secure a job in the future. But all this to say is that the future of education is online. We like to say at Arizona that the future of global is online and the future of online is global, in the sense that that will be the primary mode of education to the world in a very, very short amount of time. But at the same time, providing learning communities where people can go and get access to the resources they need, and also at the same time have a community is where I believe, at least, the future of education lies.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing up again several, but yours in a different way, the question of access. And the question of access, I hope we have time to discuss afterwards, along with that notion of socialization and also the meaning of socialization when you're not in person. I would like to on to our speaker, Professor Lawrence Sherman, and Professor Sherman, I'd like you to address the question of really very innovative technologies. The example of Imperial College and Case Western University using holographic lens glasses to bring students into the space of the medical operating room is something that was brought up there. Also, the fact that there are many places where students need to go in person, but now they will be able to do so with new technologies. I mentioned holographic learning, also AI, artificial intelligence, GIS modeling, and 3D modeling are some of the examples that we could pull from this. So could you give us your impression of what do you think the nature of the task for quality learning will be when we're using these sort of flipped classroom methods? So this would be either completely geared to remote learning, or also bringing the student through technology into a place and space and an experience, and then the classroom discussion would be focusing on what that experience was. I hope you can give us some insight into this, especially with your own background.
Well, thanks very much. And I would like to start with a philosophy about education that is one of the quotations inscribed in the wall of the largest auditorium at the National Police Academy of India in Hyderabad. It's actually a Chinese quote, I believe. It's, tell me and I may listen, show me and I may understand, involve me and I will learn. And I think we're all struggling in the changing circumstances of time and space to follow the theory that hypothesis states, which is, to me, about getting people to be able to speak in a context in which they think people are listening and they feel valued. The problem with the Oxford model that was described earlier, I'm not separating it from the Cambridge model because it's essentially been the same for 800 years. It was described earlier as a small group seminar discussion, which couldn't be further from the truth for most of the last 8 centuries. It's been a combination of large group meetings, which in the early days involved people reading from a book, hence associate professors were called readers. And then later, brilliant people delivering lectures like Isaac Newton speaking to empty classrooms because we know that he didn't get paid unless a clerk came around and counted the number of students. And many days when he was laying his ideas, there weren't any students there. So it wasn't much learning at that time, although what Newton wrote down appears to have helped people learn elsewhere. And what we were doing in the world of police education has been very much what was really happening at Cambridge, and that is having one-on-one tutorial discussions. Even in Brideshead Revisited 100 years ago, Evelyn was describing an Oxford in which people don't go to lectures, but they better meet with their tutor because they got sent down or dismissed from the university if they didn't meet with their tutor and provide their essays to the tutor on time, because the tutor and the college had a stake in getting the student through the examination, which was the only thing administered by the university that really mattered. And that hasn't changed all that much, but what I think has changed is the ways in which we can engage with students one-on-one. And so when we think about the idea of flipping a classroom, the image associated with the American classroom, which in a university like Maryland, I taught for many years with 50,000 students on campus, lots of 500 student classrooms. If you flip that to have everybody watch a video of the lecture before they come in, and then you have a discussion with 500 people, it can be pretty difficult. So of course we have teaching assistants, we have small groups. These small groups are 30 or 40 people sometimes. But what we've done at Cambridge for the last 25 years with a part-time residential master's degree program, initially for people who are going to become chief constables in England and Wales, and then subsequently for about the last 15 years, recruiting police leaders from all over the world. We have had an emphasis on lecture discussions in groups ranging from 25 to 100. And those have been lively discussions, but they've also been supported by the one-on-one sessions with tutors and a very intense series of social networks that they build while they're in residence. And it is, I think, a testament to the difference between a commuter campus like Maryland, that I know so well, and a residential campus, especially for people in midlife, to be able to get away from home, family, job pressures, etc., and to build new friendships with people who have shared common experience, but who they never met before, and who work in places hundreds of thousands of miles away. And we're finding that they stay in touch with each other, and that not so much in terms of socialization, but in terms of social capital, they have built from their one-on-one conversations, not just with their tutors, but also with their fellow students. And as we had to shut down a 1-week program for crime analysts who hadn't been served before in police education in Britain, many cases there had been no training for crime analysts for the last 10 years. We had run a series of very successful 60, 70 student 1-week classes on the methods of crime analysis that we were teaching at a higher level for the master's degree. And we were forced to convert to an online version very quickly. And so the two things we could do were to provide the lectures in video, as well as other materials that you normally associate with reading and listening in a university. The other thing we did was to provide for a 40-hour course, a total of 3 hours of one-on-one session with graduate students, or in some cases, former police chiefs with master's degrees. And we have had wonderful feedback in we've just launched this particular online course, but we've got wonderful feedback not only about those the lectures that they like, but especially the opportunity to have a one-on-one discussion about the subject matter with a subject matter expert. So I think what we don't have is a way to build networks, is a way to create one-on-one relationships with other students, which are more than about upward mobility or assortative mating or other functions for undergraduates. And I absolutely agree with Martin KRISLOV that undergraduates will continue to demand physical presence on campus, residential education to be preferred. I didn't go to Oberlin, but I went to Denton, which is very and kind of experience. What I think we have to recognize is that even if mid-career people want to have that experience, it's going to be increasingly difficult. And through various circumstances, we're going to have to shrink our 12-week on-campus course for police chiefs down to 10 days, 5 days a year in 2 to 3 day visits. But in the process of doing that, we're going to reach a lot more people. Instead of reaching at most 100 students a year from UK policing, we'll probably go up to 300 or 400. And so in that respect, I'm echoing the sentiments of Jeremy Wade and Brent White, because the value of higher education and policing really depends on critical mass. We've got to reach a lot of people with the basic framework. And then in their places, they can build the kinds of social networks around a common educational experience that we have seen historically in the university places that were limited to, well, when my father was in college before World War II, it would have been 1% of the population was able to earn a bachelor's degree qualification. Now it's much higher, but again, there's this huge stratification and indeed rising inequality because of the differences between the kinds of education people get and, in fact, the particular dimensions that I've been talking about. So as I look at online education and even the pricing of it as something that typically doesn't involve a one-on-one tutorial, I find I'm increasingly arguing that to have a tutorial online course that flips, not the classroom, it flips the tutorial, which has worked so well for so many centuries at Oxford and Cambridge. I think we have some hope of promoting a more broadly educated world where we may have more sympathy with better solutions to the challenges that face the world, such as climate change and pandemics, that depend heavily on having some technical knowledge about the causes and solutions to those kinds of problems. And as long as we have a world in which most people are denied access to understanding the problems that threaten all of us and that we have to cooperate on, I think we're all in trouble. Maybe online education can provide a quicker fix than residential education. Well, no doubt about that for reaching broad numbers of people. But we have to, I think, try to involve the people who are at the other end of those screens in a way that involves dialogue, that involves conversation. And I don't know who's going to pay for that, but I know we'll pay for it. We're pounding the table and demanding that kind of education. And that's what I'm going around the British police forces telling the police chiefs, that they've got to have opportunities for their people, who are their most important assets, to learn through talking with somebody else in a dialogue, just as in ancient Greece. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think, you know, we've learned a lot. Raj, I'd like to ask, do we have questions coming up? Because
we have a lot of questions, so I am going to start doing that. So thank you very much for an absolutely fantastic set of you know, reflections and responses to the questions. Let me begin picking up some questions and asking the panelists here. There are obviously several questions on focusing on the pedagogy of learning in the online context. So let me start maybe with INDU. Dr. Shahani, does about, do you think computer and the internet have been given enough attention as a platform for pedagogical possibilities in their own right? And or have they been used to mimic offline classroom experiences only?
So to begin with, yes, it was mimicking offline classroom experiences. But I think as the faculty started working on this, they had to create, online teaching is different. We needed shorter classes. The faculty had to redo a lot of their material that they had prepared otherwise in the classrooms, and they had to use many different ways in order to do. Had to have chat rooms. They had to do make some cold calls during the time when they are teaching, and even their computer. It was just not a slideshow that they would be able to do. So they had to change it, the pedagogy, very, very differently. And I am amazed to see how the younger faculty again adapted very quickly and integrated technology into their teaching very effectively. Let me just tell you one example of how a design school where you're teaching either prototyping or either you're teaching how to, fashion technology, or you're teaching interiors, how the faculty actually created simulations. They created work studios at home and use different softwares and different combinations of their mobile phone, their iPad, and their combination, their laptop, to create and to show the students how effectively they can actually even do a physical classroom brought into the virtual classroom, and using all kinds of new computer techniques.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shahani, for that. Marvin, there's a question about the peer group learning. I mean, I think different disciplines have different idea of peer group learning. Can students learn from each other within the digitization of higher education framework, and what kind of institutional interventions need to be made to make that experience more meaningful?
Well, I think my experience, actually, because I was teaching this spring, comports with Professor Shahani's experience, which is, I think we all got more comfortable, and I think students also got more comfortable. And so, for instance, we started using a lot of breakout rooms and chats, and there were things that we were able to do. I think that some students reported that there were certain types of classes that were better suited to technology. I agree that over the summer, we've all worked, those of us who have been primarily in person have worked to try to improve techniques, and there are lots of things that can be done. I think, again, it depends on the students and their ability to have the technology. Some of our students were sharing computers with their families, so it was harder for them to interact. But we all tried to create social platforms for students to interact with each other, and we're all learning. And I think it is we're improving the ways we use technology. And I agree with Brent that we may not be able to accommodate all students in person, but I think that for most students, the more in-person contact that we can provide, the better the outcomes will be. But certainly there are things we can do to improve our use of technology as well.
Thank you very much for that, Marvin. Maybe Rekha and Stephanie can answer this question. This is about the whole idea of how universities are dealing with the cost implications of it. In the sense that there is some expectation that if you transition from physical to online, then there is an expectation that the cost should be reduced. But then universities are indeed investing with regard to their faculty, their infrastructure and things like that. So how does one best respond to it short term, of course, also in the long? Rick and Stephanie.
Thank you. I think that's a very good question, and one that we are struggling with and we are facing practically every day. That if you are going to be online, why would the tuition be the same? So even pre-pandemic, there was an article in Forbes magazine about online learning, the cost of online learning, and what the article talks about is really the costs associated with online learning. And when you compare that with on-campus learning, there's really no direct correlation that online learning would be expensive from an institutional investor point of view mentioned. However, I think what online learning would facilitate is more access. For example, especially in the with regard to socioeconomic divide, with regard to global education, the mobility factor, all of these, if you take these into consideration, I think online learning definitely would provide more access and would be more affordable. But whether or not higher education in general will be more affordable, that is a question that Raj, you probably have to organize a separate conference on that, because that is a very critical and important question. And I was hoping that we could address that, but obviously we have so many other issues. This whole idea of when and how higher it became so expensive from every standpoint, from the institutional standpoint, and more particularly from the standpoint of students who are seeking education. I think this pandemic will force us to take a fresh look at that as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rekha. And Stephanie, please.
Sure. Well, thanks for the question. I'd like to quickly reflect on the previous that was asked. How can ensure that the online environment is one that engages students most effectively in groups, et cetera. And I think one comment I wanted to make was I think that here necessity has definitely been the mother of invention. We've been experimenting at ASU with a software that enables you to table with avatars for all the individuals in the group. And in fact, when the avatar to your right speaks, you hear it in your right ear. When the avatar to your left speaks, you hear it in your left ear. Amazing. So I think that these kind of technological advancements, simulations, we send students to Mars, right, in a simulation. This is the kind of thing that we're going to see really advancing quickly out of ed tech companies, et cetera. So back to a point that was made earlier, partnering with ed tech and public-private partnerships is going to be key. On the question of online costs, I do think that is the question of the hour, which many universities are grappling with. And pardon me. So I do think that's the cost of the hour. I think the question of the hour, and I think most people don't appreciate. And I think this is a point we need to educate communities about, is that it's actually quite expensive to offer a high quality online experience, right? At ASU, we partner with hundreds of ed tech companies to provide all kinds of different experiences, platforms, chat rooms, simulations to really enhance the experience. And we have an action lab in our online unit that evaluates whether the students in the online classes are getting the same learning or achieving the same learning outcomes as the students in the on-campus. So we're very dedicated to that, but I do think this is an issue. And universities are going to be grappling with, I think we're going to see with this budgetary question, and I think we're going to see a lot of universities either contract or perhaps go out of business as a result of these pressures?
Thank you very much, Stephanie. This is a question to Brent. Brent, you said something, global is online and online is global. And one of the things about this whole vision is that it's also about creating access for a large number of people who simply cannot afford, but also cannot access. Now, the question that is coming, and several have asked, is that how do you avoid creating both superiority and inferiority in the educational framework with regard to online and offline? Because the current framework does make that distinction that if you have done a course in a physical environment, you are valued differently. How do you work on that? And Jeremy, an equally important question is, in terms of large countries like India, and since you are heading an office of online education and digital learning, is this the way to even democratize higher education, where millions of people will simply not be able to go to a university with a gross enrollment ratio in a large country like India, barely hovering around 24%? If you have to make it meaningful, the only way is online. So Brent, please.
Yeah, I think that the reality is that online will become the default mode. And that may change a little bit of thinking about the superiority of in person, or at least in person as we think of it right now. If you leverage a model like a co-learning space, which we are going to use at 91 Springboard, there is a lot of learning that can take place both in online and interactively in person. So we might move to a more hybrid mode where students are learning online, but gathering and learning communities to talk about some of the topics which they are exploring. But I think that as we advance in online, there are a lot of things that you can do online that you can't do in person, particularly, for example, language learning. We have some colleagues at one of our university partners in China, where they are now using AI and immersive learning for students to, as they learn a language, walk on a street in India, or walk on a street in Europe or in the United States and have conversations, or sitting in a classroom, all of it interactive with the student as they engage in the learning. There's a lot of things you can do both not only in the language space, but in the sciences and didactic conversations with AI. So I think as AI advances, as virtual reality becomes part of online learning, we may discover that online learning not only loses its stigma, but becomes the preferred mode of learning. Already, I think that a large number of undergraduates or high school students graduating in the United States express a preference for online. It's still soon to tell whether COVID-19 changes that. But prior to COVID, about 58% of graduating high school students said they would prefer online learning to sitting in a classroom. However, they didn't go to online universities, rather they came to campuses. And they came to campuses because it's the experience of the campus, it's the coming of age experience that matters, I think, more than sitting in the classroom. I think for most people, the most formative experiences at university, who actually went to a physical university, didn't happen in the classroom. And we had great experiences in the classroom, but most of them happen outside. So I think we can serve more students if we create learning communities. Those can be in houses, those can be coffee shops, they can be anywhere that people can gather and the content can be delivered online.
Thank you very much, Brent. Jeremy.
Yes, I think there's no doubt about it. To meet the demand, online is the only way forward to meet the demand needed in, let's say, in a country like India with ambitious enrollment targets for the country. And each year, students, enter college age. And during a pandemic, I don't see us rapidly building brick and mortar campuses across the country. So I think there's absolutely no doubt that online is key. And it's not only just students coming into college age, it's people trying to grapple with the changing economy and less employment opportunities, needing to reskill. I think that these demands are enormous, and there's absolutely no way to even imagine meeting them without a really ambitious vision for online education.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. We almost come to the end of this session, and we've gone past the time as well, but I couldn't help but ask one question to Kathleen. It's a very interesting question, talking about sitting through a webinar started 15 hours ago. Digital fatigue is affecting us as we emphasize on digital transformation of education. Can you highlight how we can overcome some of these challenges of digital fatigue? Kathleen, you'll have the last word on it.
Yoga.
All right.
Do your yoga breathing, do your yoga exercises. I think if you take a couple of minutes out, you can, even in classrooms, but I think that's good. And, you know, one of the studies came up, the Columbia University study says that nobody should be subjected to online learning and online participation more than 4 to 5 hours a day.
Oh.
Okay, so I have to thank all our panelists. We have issues brought out that I really think we need to have another conference, as some of you suggested, because the key questions of access, cost, and really foundational, how do we really learn? And the question of how do we create meaningful relationships through online learning that will allow us to carry them through the rest of our lives.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you very much, Kathleen, for chairing this session and moderating it as well. I deeply appreciate the presence of Professor Rekha Datta, President MARVIN KRISLOV, Dr. Stephanie LINDQUIST, Professor INDU SHAHANI, Professor Lauren SHERMAN, Professor Jeremy Wade, and of course, Professor Brent White. It's been a fascinating discussion. In fact, the more I heard all of you, I was thinking that how much we are learning from each other and how much we have all learned from your own institutional experiences and various innovations that you are currently undertaking. In fact, if there's anything that this pandemic has taught all of us in higher education, is how much we are connected with each other, but also how much we are deeply impacted on account of COVID. So in that note, I would like to express my deep sense of gratitude for your presence, for your participation, and indeed for your time.